everyone, and welcome once again to the Christmas special of the Win Twice Wrestling podcast. We are on day 2 of WrestleMas.
We are.
And on day 2, the topic for discussion is, what, in your opinion, is the best decade for wrestling? Now, I think the initial thing we should get out of the way is, you said you struggle a little bit with decades and centuries
Honestly,
in terms of the definition.
That sounds so stupid.
Holly is not stupid, I can assure you on that, but occasionally
I am.
there'll be a little nugget that comes out where I'll stop in my tracks and go, wait, what?
I think I was getting confused with decades and centuries.
Okay.
Because I get confused. I know, I'm sound so stupid. You know, like people talk about the 19th century.
Yeah.
I don't know
but
when
they
that
actually
is.
mean the 1800s.
Yeah, like that's so confusing.
Yeah.
So when you said decades, my brain didn't actually listen to decades and went, oh my god,
Okay.
I don't know what century this is.
Right, before I can... That's a snippet right there. But, okay, let's say your friend was having a party and they said, it's going to be the 60s theme.
Yeah.
You know what that means, though?
Yeah, the
Okay.
years of the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're good. We've got
I know,
decades.
it's
Nailed
just...
it.
My brain just is a bit slow sometimes.
Would you like me to start this answer
Yes,
off?
please.
Okay, fine. So, for me, there's a few candidates. Well, no. I lie, there's 2 candidates.
Okay.
Depends on how you're looking at it. I'll give my personal perspective on it after.
Okay.
But the 2 arguments for me are the 1980s,
Right.
like the golden era of wrestling.
Okay.
Like Hulkamania, all that Big Bang stuff, WWF, expansion, etc., WrestleMania, the birth of that. Just the fact that the rock and wrestling connection with MTV getting involved in wrestling, it kind of gave it the mainstream media appeal. The TV ratings, I know that we're in a different world now, so TV ratings don't have the same weight that they did back then. But as you're evaluating it, when you look at what happened in some of the 80s, so I think there was a Saturday night's main event in the 80s, which had a main event of Hulk Hogan against Andre the Giant. And the TV rating was something ridiculous, which worked out about 28 million people were watching that event, and they get nowhere near that.
And you'd never get that now. No one would ever get any.
They're not even like a tenth anywhere near that these days. Even in some of the periods of, which I'm going to go on to next, which is probably the other decade that's got a good shout, is the 90s.
Oh,
the one that followed it. So as we go into the Attitude Era, so The Rock, Stone Cold, Triple H, Undertaker, Kane, Mankind, WCW blowing up, the head-to-head Monday Night Wars. TV ratings were consistently high for both of those entities as they went into the mid to late 90s, or well, not the mid 90s because that was a dark period for WWF, but as we went into the late 90s, they were both hitting big ratings. And again, we've never gone back to that. We've got now AEW and WWE. It's a rivalry to a point, but it's also not. No, because I think I saw a stat recently.
It's a stupid rivalry. Like, if people like wrestling, they don't have to just like one or the other. And
this was a thing that Vince McMahon said back in the day when WCW went live with Monday Nitro, because they chose to go head to head with WWF. And even though Vince McMahon was an absolute snake in the grass when it came to his business dealings and taking business from other territories, he said, "Well, you're splitting the audience." Yeah. It's not.
Why not
in
just
the
have it on a different day?
That's not the spirit of competition. No. That's like unethical. And again, from him is the richest thing that you can imagine him saying. But we're looking at AEW now. I like AEW. I like that it's an alternative. It's presenting something different out there. But I think I saw a stat recently that said if you added up the viewers for all their 3 shows in a week, they didn't match Raw for that week. How is that a rivalry? Yeah, it's not. I mean, they still get good crowds. Like the pay-per-views seem to do well. I don't know the stats, to be fair, on that. I probably should have done a little bit of research on it. But I'm excluding this in the decades discussion. For me, it's the 90s or the 80s. Now, I believe that if I had to gun to my head, I prefer watching the stuff in the 90s out of those 2 decades, but I think the 1980s was the ticket, because I don't think if Hulk Hogan, if the rock and wrestling explosion hadn't happened, I don't think we see the Attitude Era. I don't think anything else that comes after it is even happened. So without that, I know how time works. Obviously the 90s would have happened after the 80s. Yeah, I get that. But I don't think the wrestling world would have been to the same scale. If I look at them individually, like I said, I picked the 90s, but I think I have to go for the 1980s as being the best decade in wrestling. So
I feel like we know, like, you know where mine's going to be.
Of course. Of course. I can answer it for you, but I feel like it's important you give the answer.
So you do 80s, 90s. I will plug right in and go for noughties.
Yeah.
Very predictable. But again, I think it's just also where my interest peaked. Like, not peaked, because then it says never be higher, but it's just where my interest was. I had no desire to watch, I still don't, old matches. I know I will, and maybe I will enjoy them. But like the older stuff, it's not there for me, because I really struggle watching things that are old.
Yeah, again, that's gonna be fascinating when we have to watch these older shows, just to see how you. Because I don't know if it's going to be a case of like torture, where eventually you'll just kind of something will click and you go, oh, okay. Because you'll feel so used to having seen a fair bit of it that it'll normalise it a bit more. I don't know. Or, which I think this one's very likely, knowing you, you will dig your heels in, stamp your feet and say, I'm not having any of this.
No, probably. Yeah.
But it's
I'll still have to do it.
Well,
but
of course you will, yeah.
I just will not
piss
be
and moan and drink heavily throughout the recordings,
more than
I imagine.
Likely, So it was just a noughties for me, I think. Also, a lot of the people you mentioned from the 90s era were still around
in some capacity
for the noughties for me. And then you've got, I should get a pound every time I say his name, but Jeff Hardy, the noughties, like peaking, Jericho, Edge was still there, Mysterio, like it was all sort of there, like Eddie Guerrero, like I just remember it more. So for me, it would be silly to do any other decade that's not then.
That if I had to guess the decade you'd have picked, it's that. I don't think you picked a bad decade. I think the later we go on, the more questionable the pick would have been. Yeah. But I also think that was a kind of key. So for me and you both, that would have been the age where we knew a little bit more about kind of what was happening.
Exactly, yeah.
In terms of there. So it landed with us differently, but the characters were still engaging, like you said. And you're right. I mean, don't get me wrong, The Rock wasn't around for too much of the early noughties. Stone Cold was pretty much done come 2001, 2002. So that era had kind of stopped. But you're right, then we saw some of the bigger.
You've still got Kane and Undertaker being there for another 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, we won't talk about the American Badass again because it sends me into a very dark place. But you're right. And then in the noughties as well, I mentioned previously to you, there was the SmackDown 6, which was, as you said, Rey Mysterio, He Who Shall Not Be Named, Eddie Guerrero, Kurt Angle. It was a good time, and the matches were of fairly high consistent quality, which is really good. What, out of interest, do you know? So I offloaded a load of information early on when I was talking about the golden era, like being the 1980s of wrestling. Yeah. You were saying yes and nodding along for a lot of it, so I can see things were like twigging for you.
Some.
But do you... This is going to sound really patronising, and I honestly don't mean it to sound like that.
You've said worse to me, I'm sure. It's fine.
Oh, probably, yeah, to be fair. Does the weight of what actually happened in the 80s have any resonance with you, or are you just kind of taking it for, okay... Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely not.
So it doesn't... Right, okay. No. Oh, I've definitely got to pull out some of the older shows then. Which, well, I think we will be, to be fair, as we hit 2024. But what I'll do is, again, when we get there, I'll kind of go over the reason of why things are important, kind of put it in context for you to see...
it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I just think I would struggle actually physically watching them. Purely because, like I said, I really struggle when things aren't a good quality. Not the matches, I'm saying, like the recordings, which obviously...
the matches are going to be not the selling point.
But which, like, you'd think my brain would go, well, obviously, because it was recorded X long ago. Yeah. But I struggle with watching TV shows that are filmed...
Always Sunny in Philly, you can't get beyond season 1. I can't. It's... One thing that the 80s did have going for it massively, more so than... No, the 90s were close, but the crowd reaction was consistently good.
Right.
Like, they were noisy, they were invested,
which does
involved.
make a difference.
And because a lot of the wrestling in there, especially from the WWF side in the 80s, it was punch kick affairs. Like, it was Hulk Hogan 101. So they weren't athletic. There were the odd exception of people that could do that, like Dynamite Kid, who was brilliant, light years ahead of his time, helped develop a lot of the junior heavyweight style in Japan that's still going strong today. But the matches aren't of good quality, but what took place in the matches felt important. They didn't have to... Like, it feels a lot now of the... I'm sounding so old when I say this, but it feels like a lot of the matches these days, there isn't a logic. It's just, right, one spot to the next spot to the next one. There's
Okay,
no
yeah,
logical
I see what
reason.
you're
They're
saying.
doing it to be athletic. They're not doing it to beat the opponent.
And tick boxes, and you need
Exactly.
to show that
Get
you
your
can
shit
do
in.
X, Y, Z rather than
Exactly that.
win.
Where that wasn't the thing in
Mhm.
the 80s. That wasn't the selling point. So, yeah, I'm genuinely really interested to see how you'll warm to it, or
Well, yeah,
because
we'll see.
there has to be something that at some point you'll see and go, that was all right actually. I'll take that as a win.
Okay,
But
Well,
how many of those?
that challenge is open.
Well, yeah, like I said, we have to actually get to one of those shows first.
Yeah.
But yeah, is there anything else you wanted to cover in the noughties? Or-
I don't believe so.
No, okay.
Good,
Well,
good era, the noughties.
it was. Well, it's a great word as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that brings us to the episode end of the second day of WrestleMas, and we will see you tomorrow for episode 3.
Bye.
Bye.